Have you ever wanted to visit Japan? As a lifelong fan of Japanese culture and many Japanese franchises, I got the chance to go on the greatest trip of my life to Japan during summer 2025. Between the endless urban landscapes and massive cultural landmarks, there was so much to explore. However, I was just as excited to explore the retro game stores, secondhand stores, and of course, anything Pokemon. You see, outside of Japan, the Pokemon Center exists solely as an online retailer. However, in Japan, there are Pokemon Center storefronts all over the country that sell all types of Pokemon memorabilia. That is why, over the course of my 16-day visit to Japan, I set out to visit as many Pokemon centers as I could, all while exploring Japan to the fullest. We landed in Tokyo on May 18th after a very long flight. 14 hours being cramped in a window seat. We had planned on a pretty strict itinerary that took us all across Japan, as well as 2 nights in Seoul, and there was just enough time to do what everyone wanted to do. But first, since I decided to wait to buy my plane ticket, I had landed at the other airport in Tokyo alone and needed to take a train into Asakusa to the hotel. However, I think these initial views made up for it. And yes, I would start recording in landscape pretty soon. Night 1 was just some light sightseeing, but day 2 we were starting off strong with a long day, visiting Disney Sea, where we listened to the most insane voice acting ever for the Tower of Terror. We weren't really sure what he was saying, but it sounded pretty sick. With plans that evening to visit the Tokyo Skytree, which housed the first Pokemon Center of the trip, Pokemon Center Skytree Town. We learned that each Pokemon Center has a mascot Pokemon with a giant statue at the front of the store, and this one happened to be Rayquaza. They also had this awesome Mega Rayquaza statue too, and we also found out that a lot of these are signed by members of the Pokemon development team, so we tried to keep an eye out for that. This was my first Pokemon Center experience, and I knew we were going to be visiting a few at least, so I didn't get anything from this store. However, it showed me my very first taste of the Pokemon Fit plushes, which are these smaller plushes in the small shelves. My favorite Pokemon has been Sandile since I was a kid, and after seeing that they had Pokemon Fit plushes from the 5th generation, it became my mission to find and buy the whole Sandile line over the course of the trip. Day 3 we woke up early thanks to some jet lag and checked out Asakusa in the morning, and we had the best ramen of our lives at this small store that we found, and we still talk about it to this day, and checked out of our hotel for a quick trip to our next location. However, if any of you have ever been to Japan, you know there can be some steep learning curve when it comes to figuring out the Japanese transit system. We quickly learned that Google Maps will be our best friend throughout the trip, but our Airbnb for the night will be in Yokohama, specifically Enoshima. This city let us explore the beach, feel the Pacific Ocean for the very first time in my life, and experience our first visit at a Japanese McDonald's. And importantly, that night we planned to stop at the Yokohama Pokemon Center, which is also right next to the Chinatown that we also planned on checking out. So after we enjoyed our day at the beach, we ended up at Pokemon Center Yokohama, which has Kyogre as its mascot, and I really enjoyed the store's big open layout. I picked up a Gengar coin purse that was extremely useful for the rest of the trip, and if you are going to Japan, I definitely recommend picking up a coin purse because we use coins everywhere. I also picked up this Emboar and Crocodile plush, which checks off the first member of the Sandile evolution line. And also Emboar is the evolution of my first ever Pokemon Tepig, so I felt it was right to pick up one. After that stop at the Pokemon Center, we did check out the Yokohama Chinatown, which had an awesome atmosphere as well. All the restaurants had real mainland Chinese food, which wasn't really our style honestly as Americans, but we did find some great pork dumplings that we had for dinner. And quick side note, one of the biggest aspects of this trip we weren't expecting was the amount of steps we'd be getting daily. Just 3 days into the trip, we were consistently logging 25k plus steps every day, and this number would not slow down. And as a quick tip, if you are planning on traveling really anywhere, make sure to get some comfortable walking shoes. I wore white Nike Air Force Ones the entire trip, which were quite literally falling apart by the end of the trip, and the bottoms were literally ripping off of the sole. Also in the rain, they were absolutely useless, and we spent a lot of time drying off our shoes after days that we spent outside. But anyway, we were all pretty tired after a long day at the beach, so we just ended up going back to the Airbnb. But day 4 started out fast as we were leaving Yokohama after just staying one night and heading for our first long stay of the trip. It also required us to take the Shinkansen, which was a really exciting experience for us. Traveling a large portion of the country in just about 2 hours was insane, especially at high speeds that these trains are capable of moving at. And we took the Shinkansen to our home for the next 4 nights, Kyoto, the cultural capital of Japan. After arriving, we explored Kyoto Station, got settled into our Airbnb, and then went out for some barbecue. And after dinner, we decided to check out our third Pokemon Center, Pokemon Center Kyoto, with its mascot Ho-Oh. This store was on the smaller side because it was on the upper level of a mall, but again, really packed with all sorts of memorabilia. I picked up this really cool Mewtwo that actually had some cookies inside of it too, but I was more interested in just being able to display this case. But that was about all for day 4 as we headed back to the Airbnb for the night. Day 5 was an exciting one. We explored the Kyoto Nintendo store, which had a ton of things from every Nintendo franchise. It also had this really cool rooftop area with this Mario display. The rest of the day we spent exploring the cultural side of Kyoto, which was actually the capital of Japan from the year 794 to 1868. We saw the old neighborhood of Gion, which had the only Starbucks inside a traditional Japanese house, and we walked up what seemed a million stairs to this really awesome temple, which had one of the best views of the entire trip. I should also mention that this was probably the hottest day of the trip, which says a lot because it was hot every day. Safe to say, everyone was sweating when we got to the top, but the nature and cultural significance of this place was magical, and I could talk about it for another while. That night, we got some ramen, walked through the 1,000 torii gates, and explored the general area. Safe to say, we definitely slept well that night. Day 6 and 7 were Pokemon free, but some highlights included visiting a cat cafe, the Kyoto Railway Museum, this really cool temple again, and the bamboo forest. We also took a day trip out to Nara, which is about an hour train ride from Kyoto. It is most famous for its bowing deer, which you've probably seen on TikTok, which beg for cookies that vendors sell in the street. These guys are absolutely everywhere and quickly surround you and start biting at your shirt and hands if they see or smell cookies. We also saw those famous guys who hit the mochi with the hammers, who you've probably also seen on TikTok, and a giant temple with one of the biggest Buddhas in the world inside. But that would do it for Kyoto, and on day 8 we left for my personal favorite destination of the trip, Osaka. Day 8 was insane, it was so busy, and we did have some time to kill before we could check into our next Airbnb after arriving in Osaka, so we decided to try and check out both Pokemon centers in Osaka this day. Keep in mind we also had all of our luggage, so we were kind of just lugging everything with us, but it ended up working out pretty well. Pokemon Center 1 was Pokemon Center Osaka. This one was absolutely huge, and it was inside of a mall that also had a Nintendo store on the same floor, and this place was absolutely packed. I'm not quite sure why it was so packed. I think it may have been a weekend, but Pokemon Center Osaka's mascot is Koraidon, and this one we walked around and checked out, but there was just so many people. So anyway, we kind of just really checked it out and then ended up going to the next Pokemon Center. And after a quick train ride, we made it to the second Pokemon Center, Pokemon Center Osaka DX, which had the Kanto legendary birds guarding the entrance. The crowd here was a lot more manageable, so we walked around for a little bit, and I was finally able to find Sandile. So that's 2 out of the 3, just missing Crocodile. Overall, for the Pokemon Center in Osaka though, I really like both honestly, and I think I just really like the second one because we were able to experience it a lot more. But after this, we were finally able to check into our Airbnb, and we went to explore Namba, one of my favorite spots in all of Japan that we visited. Namba is famous for its retro video game stores and all sorts of Japanese pop culture memorabilia. In one of the first stores we visited, I stumbled upon this case, which held just about every older Pokemon. I definitely kept a mental note of this place in the back of my head just because we were going to be in Osaka for a couple days, so I wanted to keep it in mind. Namba also is very touristy, so the prices can be pretty high, but again, everything is still so cheap just because we are in Japan. But other than this, we just ended up hanging out in Osaka for the night, getting some dinner, and calling it early because we were all just so tired from a long travel day. Day 9, we visited Universal Studios Japan, which had really cool sets of all sorts of franchises. I've been to Universal Studios in Florida, and a lot of similarities were apparent if you've been to both, so a little taste of home. But the main reason we came here was for Super Nintendo World. This place was amazing, and we had to wait all day with a virtual ticket to get in, and once we were in, it was absolutely packed. Sadly, we didn't get on any rides because the wait times were insane, but the scenery and immersion were stunning. We walked around the main area, which was Mario themed, and we also checked out the side area that they had Donkey Kong stuff at. But after checking that out, we went to my favorite location of the whole trip, Dotonbori. This place was absolutely stunning and is in the downtown area of Osaka. It has a huge canal running through the middle with the Glyco Man overlooking it, which is an iconic 33-meter tall LED billboard symbolizing energy, victory, and the city's lively culture since 1935. We spent all night wandering through the surrounding shopping areas and checking out the scenery. Day 10 was our last day in Osaka, and we spent it visiting the Osaka Aquarium to see some Asian sea life, and once again visited the Dotonbori district, and there's one thing I had to revisit before leaving Osaka. We went back to Namba and I decided to buy some games. I picked up Pokemon Black and Pokemon White 2 for the DS from their older collections, which were my first Pokemon games, and I really look forward to picking these up for a decent price. I also picked up Pokemon Shield and Pokemon Legends Arceus since I didn't have the physical copies of these games, and they're almost 50% off in Japan when paying with USD. And you can play them in English just like any other cartridge, so it's pretty much just half off. But after those pickups, we went back to prepare for a long couple days of travel ahead. Day 11, we woke up, packed our things, and took the Shinkansen to Hiroshima. This was a quick stop with just one night, but this was a city I was super excited to see. But first, right in the station was Pokemon Center Hiroshima, which had the red shiny Gyarados as its mascot. I really enjoyed this store because it was right in the station, so we could knock it off right when we got there and not have to worry about it. And it also was really big, especially for the smaller location that it was in, and we could kind of check everything out because it was so empty. I picked up some stickers and a really cool exclusive Gyarados and Pikachu plush you can only get at this store. But we were also in Hiroshima because I'm a huge history buff, and we ended up finding an Airbnb right next to the Atomic Dome, which was the exact spot where an atomic bomb was dropped during World War II by the United States. Visiting this area, the memorial, and the museum was a moving and touching experience that I couldn't do justice just in this video. Hiroshima is definitely off the beaten path, but a city I highly encourage visiting. And also a city you can pretty much check everything off in a day or two. After that, we were also able to check out the Hiroshima Castle, and on the walk home we ran into a Book Off, which if you don't know is a huge secondhand store chain in Japan known for its collection of Japanese retro games and consoles amongst other things. This store was huge, and I picked up a copy of Pokemon X in Japanese for the 3DS, and I also picked up a Part 3 JoJo manga book with this really cool art in the cover. Jotaro is my favorite character in the anime, and I just thought this would be a really cool piece for my collection. And obviously I don't really have any hope of ever reading it because it is in Japanese, but I do enjoy the artwork. And just as we were settling into our Airbnb in Hiroshima, it was time for the biggest travel day yet. Bright and early on day 12, we had a flight to catch. We packed our bags again and took a bus to Hiroshima Airport, where we caught a flight to Seoul, South Korea. This was a pretty last minute addition to our trip with a quick 2 days visiting Seoul. We didn't do anything Pokemon related, but another moving experience of this trip was doing an organized tour of the DMZ between North and South Korea. We visited emotional memories of the war, stories of families being separated by the regimes, and it was eye-opening hearing for our tour guide, who was on the younger side, just how much the threat of war looms on the people of South Korea at all times. Overall, our visit to Seoul was amazing, but we were excited to get back to Japan for the final leg of our trip. Day 14, we flew back to Tokyo, and for the final stay of our trip, we had an Airbnb that was actually Pokemon themed in Itabashi City, which we planned to explore, as well as Shibuya and Shinjuku, which were also on the left side of Tokyo. The first night we had planned was visiting Shibuya and the world famous Shibuya Crossing. This giant crosswalk is known for the pure number of people that cross every day and the insane views that come with all the people crossing the street at the same time. Safe to say, we crossed it a few times and got a ton of cool videos and photos of everything. Day 15, we woke up and it was time to do some Pokemon things. We set out to visit 2 Pokemon centers today. Firstly, Pokemon Center Mega Tokyo, with Miraidon as its mascot. This store was in the middle of an open concept mall called Sunshine City Mall. There was a bunch of stuff surrounding it, like these statues, and the whole floor was kind of Pokemon themed as well. The store was also pretty packed since it was a weekend, I believe, at the time, and a lot of people were visiting the mall and shopping, so it was hard to move, but we were able to check everything out. I know I haven't mentioned it for the past few stores, but I have been on the hunt for the final Crocodile plush, and I haven't had any luck. I'm not sure why the specific line seems to be so rare, but I swear I've seen every other Unova Pokemon a bunch of times. But after visiting Pokemon Center Mega Tokyo, we went back to Shibuya to do some more exploring during the day. Again, it seemed like everywhere we went this day we couldn't move since it was a weekend, and the busiest part of Tokyo definitely wasn't an exception. But after some more subway trips, we made it to the Pokemon Center I think I was most looking forward to, Pokemon Center Shibuya. This Pokemon Center is perhaps the most iconic, probably because of the Mewtwo statue that is also the mascot of the store. This Mewtwo was so cool in real life, and cameras don't show the scale of it properly. We explored the inside of the store, which is probably the most crowded of any of the Pokemon centers, and it had this cool design lab where you can make custom t-shirts if you wanted to, and also had a lot of the same stuff too. I checked for Crocodile, but again, it was not there. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but this was the last full day we had in Japan, and we were pretty sure that this would be the last Pokemon Center we had a chance to check out. The next day, we had a flight at 5:15 p.m., so we weren't sure how much we could get done. But for the rest of day 15, we walked around Shibuya, Shinjuku, and had a great last full day exploring Japan. Day 16 was the end of our 16 days in Japan. We packed up our bags and just barely squeezed everything into our suitcases and checked out of our Airbnb at the scheduled 10 a.m. We were flying out of Narita Airport, which is the further airport I flew into alone, so I knew about the train that took you directly to the airport in a pretty quick 45 minutes. That meant we had some time to kill, and we decided to make the most of it. That ramen place we went to in Asakusa at the beginning of the trip, we talked about constantly throughout the trip, and we decided we wanted to go there one last time on our way out of town. And what else was on that side of Tokyo? One last Pokemon Center before we left for good. And after a subway trip across the city, we landed at Pokemon Center Tokyo DX with Mew as its mascot. I am really happy we ended up making a quick trip here, as this was one of my favorite Pokemon Centers of the trip. It was pretty empty so we could fully explore it, and after checking there was once again no Krookodile. Oh well, maybe I can get it online or something after the trip. But I did find something that may have been even better. This Mega Charizard X plush that was the last on the shelf, which is one of my favorite Pokemon. I also picked up this Ninja Pikachu plush that is exclusive to this Pokemon Center. I really like the design of the store with this inner circular area holding a lot of the merchandise and this big Snorlax statue in the lobby area. I noticed that a lot of these stores are definitely off the beaten path and you have to hunt them down. Most were in malls that you had to find pretty discreet entrances to and take the elevator to a very specific floor. But after that purchase and literally stuffing the Charizard into my backpack because I was out of room, we headed to our final stop of the trip, Dragon Ramen. This meal was just as good as we remembered it, and we got to take one last stroll through Asakusa, which felt like our home in Japan since it was our first stop of the trip. Even though we were only here 2 weeks ago, it felt like we were in Asakusa 6 months ago with everything we had done. We hopped on the train and made it to the airport where we flew back home. This trip to Japan was some of the best times of my life, and as someone who hasn't really traveled much, never mind out of the country, this was an eye-opening experience of another country, culture, and people. I know I didn't really say it much, but the amount of friendly people and shop owners that we met throughout the trip and showed extreme hospitality to us could be a video in itself, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to go on a trip like this. And over the course of 16 days, we were able to visit 9 unique Pokemon centers all across Japan, and I think we got a great taste of Pokemon culture all across Japan as well. That being said, I wasn't able to get my hands on that Krookodile plush, so let's check the website. Oh, I guess there's really only one option then. Thank you guys for getting to this part of the video, and if you did enjoy, I would please ask if you considered leaving a like or subscribing. I really am trying to get to 1,000 subscribers this year, and I would really appreciate if you could support me, and it's completely free. If you enjoyed this video, please think about checking out some of the other stuff I have going on. In my last video, I actually completed a challenge run of Pokemon Black 2 while only using Pokemon I spun on a wheel. Other than that, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you all soon.